students to Ulster County Community College. I am very happy today we are going to have the author, Ernesto Quiñonez. But before we begin, let me remind you to please silence your phones and be aware there are exits on this side and in the back. And this is part of the SUNY Ulster Herbert and Sofia Reuner Library Series, which is a special program that began in 1998 to bring renowned writers to campus every fall. It provides a unique opportunity for SUNY Ulster students and community members to hear award-winning authors read from their work. The series is co-sponsored by the Ulster County College Foundation and the McDonald DeWitt Library. Ernesto Quiñonez is an acclaimed author and oral storyteller for the Moth. He is a Sundance Writers Lab Fellow and last appeared in the Blackout episode of PBS American Experience. He is currently an associate professor at Cornell University's MFA program. His essays have appeared in the New York Times, Esquire, Newsweek, Pais, Latina Magazine, and more. The New York Times claimed his debut novel, Bodega Dreams, a new immigrant classic, which has since gone on to become a landmark in contemporary literature and is required reading in many high schools and colleges around the country. His second novel, Chango's Fire, was also well received, with the Washington Post declaring it succeeds in its rich characterizations of the people of the Barrio. Quiñonez ably illuminates the sordid politics of gentrification and the unexpected places new immigrants turn to for social and spiritual support. Today, Tom Impola, professor at SUNY Ulster, will be moderating. And now can we all give a big hand to Ernesto Quiñonez.
So thanks for inviting me, Dolores and Tom and Carrie and all those I met, and SUNY Ulster, and thank you all for coming, for showing up to listen to me read. I'm from El Barrio, also known as Spanish Harlem or East Harlem, from Manhattan. And it's always been, it's changing now, but it always was an immigrant neighborhood. And I remember when I was like 13, I was waiting for next at the handball court, and two of my friends were arguing, sort of, and one of them says to the other one, I got syphilis. And the other one says, you wish you had syphilis. He goes, I got syphilis. And I got really excited because I thought he was a superhero. And I was 13. And so I got up, even though I had next, waiting, and I said, who got syphilis? What's syphilis? Who's syphilis? What's his power? And they both looked at each other like, oh, he has no idea. So they said, his power, blindness. And I was like, wow, how does he get people blind? And they're like, then they started laughing. They're like, you don't know what syphilis is. You don't know what. And then just the way they said it, I said, oh man, this is about sex. I'm dead. So I just said, man, I know what syphilis is, man. I don't care. I know what syphilis is. Then, so they followed me like, no, tell us, what's syphilis? I said, I don't have to tell you, right? I don't have to tell you. I know what it is. I don't have to tell you. So I was 13, and this followed me forever. Like, these are the guys that you grow up, just like any small town, and pretty much these are the guys that you become men with, and they never let you live anything down. So like I was like in high school, I was like 15, and they're like, he didn't know what syphilis was when he was 13. And I was like, I was 12. And then when they will appear again, he didn't know what syphilis was when he was 13. I said, that's a lie, I was 10. So I kept bringing it down and bringing it down. So this is the 80s, right, in Spanish Harlem. And what everybody wanted was cable TV. Everybody wanted cable TV. And the motto was, or the saying was, if your neighbor has it, you have it. Because you will steal it from your neighbor. And all you needed was a splinter, and you run your own wire from your apartment to their apartment. And sometimes you can do it from the roof, sometimes you can do it from the hallway. But it was actually the easiest thing. Anyway, so then one day at the same handball court, I'm waiting for next, and one of the prettiest girls in the neighborhood, her name was Cecilia, but we used to call her Ceci, sat really close to me, and then I used to like her, and I was wondering why she was so close to me. And she said, "Do you have cable?" And I said, "Yeah, I have cable." And we had cable because my neighbor had cable, okay, because we were broke. And Ceci was broke too. And Ceci said, "My neighbor has cable." She said it. And she said, "If you can hook me up with cable, I'll give you sex." Just like that. And I was like, oh my God, I gotta hook this girl up with cable now. I gotta get the splinter. And you go to Radio Shack, the splinter was something like 49 cents. And you can easily find a wire somewhere, or you can just basically cut it from some other place, some building that's abandoned or something. It was the easiest thing to do. So I said, all right, okay, well, so, all right, who's your next door neighbor? Because you also don't want to steal care from someone who can kill you, And she goes, "It's this really old lady, where you should have no problem." And I was like, okay, right. So I hooked her up with cable. And we were supposed to meet at the handball court, and I remember there was this project on 115th and 2nd Avenue, and supposedly, on the 8th floor, there was a little, on the stairwell, there was this little nook where no one can see you, and you can have sex there. And I was wondering, how do you have sex standing up? But I was like, okay, I'll deal with that when I get there, all right? Because you couldn't lay down. And my friends who supposedly had sex, and some of them did. Some of them weren't lying because their girlfriends actually were pregnant. But I was with those that was lying. Yeah, man, I was in Puerto Rico, man. This girl named Marta, we lies, all lies. Anyway, right? So there was this. They said, you have to make sure though that the elevator is working, because if the elevator is not working, you can't have sex there because they're going to be walking up the stairs. So you have to make sure the elevator is not working, right? And also bring a stick in case the light is there, so you can just hit the light and it gets dark, right? So before I was to meet Ceci, I went there just to scope it out to make sure. And I just remember, like every other stairwell in Spanish Harlem, pretty much it smelled of urine. It was terribly disgusting. But you're like, I was like 16, and you're like, your hormones don't care. So I remember the smell. It was horrible, but I said, okay, it doesn't matter. And the light was already out, so I didn't need a stick. The light wasn't working, and the elevators both of them were actually working, which is really a miracle, that both elevators were working. Usually there's only one elevator that's working, or none of them are working. So I said, okay, and so I went to the handball court to meet Ceci, and I forgot what time it was, but we're supposed to meet at a certain time. And I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and then I realized she wasn't showing up, man. She was not coming. She basically had lied to me, right? So now, what do I do, right? If this gets out, my friends are gonna kill me. It's worse than not knowing what syphilis is. They're gonna say, "Yo, Ceci took you, bro." So I just had to eat it. I'm like, there's nothing here you can do, And I was saying, well, maybe you can talk to Ceci and say, can you lie and say we had sex? That way, I get off the hook for the syphilis thing, And I decided, no, don't even do that. Just leave it, let it go. And when I saw her, the first time I saw her around the neighborhood, she said hi and never brought that up as if it never happened. Anyway, so fast forward like almost 20 years, right? And I had written this book called Bodega Dreams. And my first reading was at this big Barnes & Noble's on 17th Street. And it was packed, and I saw that there was a lot of people from El Barrio, people that I knew, and faces that I knew were in the audience. And I was after the reading, a big line formed, to get their book signed. And a lot of the people from El Barrio, some were friends, some were acquaintances, some were not, just people from El Barrio, they would always ask me the same question, pretty much all of them, and it was like, am I in it? And I would always say, in some way you are. That was what I would say to all of them. And as I kept signing, from the corner of my eye, I saw her. That it was Ceci. And she was different, but so was I. All right? No one's a kid anymore. She was a little on the heavy side, but so was I. All right? It was like, everybody's getting old. And I said, oh my God, I should now, cash in. You know, I say, listen, you owe me sex, man. And I wasn't seeing anybody at the time. You owe me sex. Maybe I should write that on the book. You owe me sex, liar. You know. But I said, you know, it's all right. You know, don't do that. Just be cool, right? And when it was her turn to get the book signed, you know, I noticed that she asked me the same thing. Am I in it? And I said, the same. In some way you are. And then I wrote to her just what I was writing to everyone, because it was such a big line. You know, thanks for coming. Thanks for your kindness. You know, pa'lante, and that's it, and my name. And she read it, and I think she was expecting me to write something else or something more. And she just like, you know, like was kind of disappointed what I wrote. I was like, and then she dug into her purse, right? And she took out a little mini cereal box. You know, the mini cereal, the one serving box, and it was checks. And she says, here's what I really wanted to give you. She gave me checks. She gave me the little cereal. So she was saying that she had never said sex, that she had said checks, right? That she had said checks. So she gave me the cereal. I got it, you know. I got it. But I thought it was cool. I thought it was funny. Anyway, so then you know, I teach at Cornell, and sometimes when I tell my students that there was a time where, as well as now, there was a time where unless you had cable, you only had 8 channels, and it sucked. And you actually had to get out of the couch to turn the channel, unless you had cable. And then when I tell them, and they think I'm a fossil. And then when I tell them the story of Ceci, they think I'm a sad fossil. Anyway, I wanted to share that with you. So this is my new novel, Taina, and it's basically an urban fairy tale. And I'm going to read in Spanish, and then I'm going to read in English. Probably in Spanish for like 7-8 minutes, and then in English for about the same. And then I'm going to take some questions from Tom as well as from you. This is Taina. Y cuando Taina Flores quedó embarazada a los 15 años, alegó que quizás algún ángel había entrado en su proyecto. Tomó el ascensor, marcó su piso, se bajó y abandonó su cuerpo para poder entrar flotando como neblina por debajo de la puerta de su dormitorio. Los ancianos del Salón del Reino de los Testigos de Jehová interrogaron a la madre de Taina, la hermana Flores, y ésta juró que su hija nunca había estado con un hombre, que ella le había enseñado a su hija bien. Si es macho, puede. La hermana Flores dijo que ella no le quitaba el ojo de encima de su hija y que estaba seguro que Taina ni siquiera se masturbaba. Esta respuesta provocó a los ancianos a sentirse incómodos. Se retrocedieron en sus asientos, si bien eso era un pecado, el masturbarse era un pecado, pero eso no había podido poner a Taina embarazada. Los ancianos preguntaron sobre el círculo menstrual de Taina, si era regular, se arrastraba, variaba, o qué tipo de toalla sanitaria usaba, la adhesiva o la que se introducía y tenía la forma del miembro de un hombre. A estas alturas ya Taina se había quedado sin aliento y era su madre que contestaba todas las preguntas. El juicio duró semanas. Cada domingo al terminar de la iglesia, las 2 mujeres eran convocadas por los ancianos a un cuarto frío. A pesar de la vergüenza de saber que toda la congregación se reía a sus espaldas, la hermana Flores se mantenía firme, defendiendo la versión de su hija, que ningún hombre la había tocado. Los ancianos sugirieron llevar a Taina al hospital metropolitano, no para su bien de salud, sino para confirmar que ella no era una virgen. Sin embargo, Taina y la hermana Flores se negaron. Una y otra vez se negaron. Dios sabe que yo he dicho la verdad, juraba la hermana Flores. Los ancianos no tuvieron otra opción que expulsar a las 2 de la verdad. ¡Qué vergüenza! Decían que había sido esta vergüenza, este bochorno, el que convirtió a Taina y a su madre como ermitañas, viviendo encerradas en un cuarto en penitencia. Decían que ese bochorno, esta vergüenza que todo el vecindario conocía, es lo que le había hecho que Taina dejara de cantar. Era ese bochorno el que ambas mujeres tenían miedo de enfrentar y por eso cerraron la puerta a todos y a todo. Decían que doña Flores había sido la peor de las madres. Decían que doña Flores había imaginado que incluso desde niña cualquier madre hubiera podido ver que Taína Flores iba a ser hermosa y por eso traer problemas. Y cuando los ojos de Taína comenzaron a brillar como lagos en el Central Park y sus pechos pasaron de ser objetos de burla de los chicos a ser objetos que ellos deseaban acariciar en la oscuridad, era seguro que esto iba a suceder. A una jovencita bonita como Taína hay que mantenerla bajo llave y doña Flores conocía bien al tipo de hombres que esperaban a las muchachas entrar solas en ascensores vacíos. Después de lo que todos concluyeron que era una tragedia, enviaron a los consejeros de nuestra escuela a pasar por el apartamento 2B en el 1514 de la calle 100 y la Primera Avenida. Doña Flores nunca le abrió la puerta a los detectives. Los detectives fueron varias veces para realizar un informe obligatorio, pero doña Flores no le abrió. Los trabajadores sociales tocaron la puerta también, pero doña Flores no le abrió. Poco después, para alejar estas visitas no deseadas, doña Flores sacó a Taína de la escuela. No llenaron papeles, no usó la educación de hogar para pretexto. Un día, Taína simplemente dejó de asistir. Doña Flores era la única que ahora se veía en la calle, siempre llevando provisiones o de camino a cobrar los beneficios de la asistencia social. Con el tiempo, cuando ya el chisme dejó de ser fresco, el barrio encontró nuevos temas de conversación y todos empezaron a tratar a ambas mujeres como querían ser tratadas y las dejaron quietas. Muchas veces llegué hasta la puerta yo del apartamento de Taína. Yo vivía en el 10º piso, en el mismo proyecto donde Taína vivía, y yo tomaba el ascensor y marcaba el 2º piso. Al salir, mi corazón se aceleraba como si tuviera miedo de despertar a un bebé que no se debía disturbar. Callado, caminaba hasta el 2º piso, al 2B, donde Taína vivía, y cuando estaba lo suficiente cerca, pegaba el oído a la izquierda de su puerta. Oía un silencio absoluto, como si el apartamento estuviera vacío y listo para ser alquilado. Dejaba mi oreja pegada a la puerta y cuando la vecina del 2A me descubrió, me dijo que ella había hecho lo mismo y que no oía nada, que ningún sonido escapaba por debajo de la puerta del 2B, como ni siquiera los muertos lo habitaran, porque ella decía que hasta los muertos hacen ruido. Pero yo seguí visitando su puerta. Yo estaba seguro de que Taína y su madre serían como personajes bíblicos. Tenía esta visión de gente de todas partes del mundo en una peregrinación al barrio para tener una ínfima posibilidad de ver por un segundo a una virgen embarazada viviendo en los proyectos del East River. Pegarían sus oídos a la puerta del 2B, al igual como yo lo había hecho, y si fueran afortunados, pudieran recibir la bendición de oír un suspiro escapar de los santos pulmones de Taína. Yo estaba de seguro que todo el barrio iba a hacer esto, pero esto no ocurrió. And when at 15, Taína Flores became pregnant, she said that maybe some angel had entered her project, taken the elevator, punched her floor, stepped off, and left his body so he could drift under her bedroom like mist. The elders at the Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses, they questioned Taína's mother, Sister Flores, and she vowed that Taína had never been with a man, that she had taught her daughter well. Si es macho, puede. Sister Flores said that she kept so close an eye on her daughter that she was sure that Taína didn't even masturbate. Her reply had made the elders uncomfortable. They squirmed in their chairs, and though a sin, that couldn't have made Taína pregnant. The elders inquired about Taína's cycles. Was she early, late, or did they vary? What types of pads did she use, the adhesive kind or the inserted type that are shaped like a man's organ? By this time, all the air had gone flat in Taína's life, and it was her mother who was answering all the questions. The spiritual trial went on for weeks. Every Sunday after service, the two women were called by the elders into a cold room. And though embarrassed that the entire congregation was laughing behind her back, Sister Flores stood by her daughter's story. The elders proposed to take Taina to Metropolitan Hospital to confirm that she was no longer a virgin. Still, Taina and Sister Flores refused. Time and time again, they refused. Dios sabe la verdad, she said. This left the elders with no choice but to kick both women out of the truth. Afterwards, the two women became an odd sight in Spanish Harlem because they never spoke much to each other or to anyone. In the street, they walked hand in hand, mother clutching daughter, and made only necessary visits to the supermarket or the Checo mate for welfare benefits. There were places that the two had never been to, like a movie theater or a beauty salon or a bakery. The women were living in a universe of two, and it seemed that not even crowds could ever disturb them, not the catcalls from the corner boys directed at Taina, mira, todo eso tuyo. Not gossip from the laundromat women whose bites were directed at Doña Flores, perra, cuidan mejor a su hijo que esa. At school, Taina sat alone and got lost among a sea of teenagers. She never cared for clothes, makeup, popularity, or anything. Like her mother, she would smile when smiled at, but not talk back to you, as if her smile was telling you that she was not your enemy, but she did not care for your friendship. The boys liked her. They all fell in love with Taina, but they soon lose interest when she stared at walls or anything in front of her, as if the person next to her didn't exist. The boys started calling Taina considerate, but I wondered if Taina knew she was beautiful. It is not easy to know if you are beautiful, and I wonder what else Taina did not know. Did she know that her voice was a gift? I had heard that Taina sang and that she sang beautifully, that she had made the school chorus, that when she took her solo, everyone felt shivers. In her voice was the origin of music. It starts with a cry like that of a newborn. And then the wailing turns, it changes, and it seeps inside your skin, and it drowns out all your pain. In her voice, Miss Cahill, the science teacher, had said that everyone saw whom they loved and who loved them back, that they could feel their loved ones, smell their scents, that Taina's voice had woven itself into the fabric of their clothes, that for weeks, no matter how much soap or how many times they would wash them, echoes would remain, that her voice was fixed into every strand of their hair too, like cigarette smoke. They could smell Taina's voice for days, that day when she sang, a black girl had wept and said to Taina, "You gave it all to the fire, honey. It was like church." That's what I wanted to hear. That's what I wanted. I wanted that sound, that voice, so I could hear, so I could see who loved me. A sound that people wait their whole lives for. But all was lost. And if I remember well, Taina had been in one of my classes. It was biology, and she never sang. She only said one word, pigeon. The word sounded hard, as if her tongue had never known sweets, and her accent was pregnant with Spanish. Shame. They said that it was this bochorno, this vergüenza, this shame that had turned Taina and her mother to behave like monks, spending their lives locked in a room doing penance. They said that it was the shame that the neighborhood knew about that caused Taina to stop singing. It was this shame that the two single women were afraid to face and therefore had shut the door on everyone and everything. They said Doña Flores had been the worst of mothers. They said Doña Flores should have known better, that even as a child, any mother could see that Taina Flores was going to be beautiful and therefore bring trouble. And when Taina's eyes began to sparkle like the lakes in Central Park, and her breasts went from things that boys made fun of to things that boys wanted to hold in the dark, this sort of disaster was certain to happen. A pretty young girl like Taina must be kept under lock and key, and Doña Flores was no stranger to men who waited for unaccompanied girls to enter empty elevators. After what everyone concluded was a tragedy, counselors from our school were sent to call upon apartment 2B at 514 East 100th Street and 1st Avenue. Doña Flores never answered the door. Detectives made several visits to take the mandatory reports, but Doña Flores never answered the door. Social workers knocked, Doña Flores never answered, and soon, to cut down on all these unwanted visits, Doña Flores pulled Taina out of school. No papers were filed, no homeschool was used as pretext. Taina one day just stopped attending. Doña Flores was not the only one you see on the street, and she was either carrying groceries or going to the cash to cash in her welfare checks at the Checomate. In time, when the gossip was no longer fresh, Spanish Harlem found new things to talk about, and everyone started treating the two women the way they wanted to be treated and left them alone. Many times I visited that of Taina's apartment. I lived on the 10th floor on the same project, and I would take the elevator down and punch the second floor. When I stepped out, my heart would race as if I was to disturb an infant that should be left sleeping. I stealthily walked towards 2B, and when I get close enough, I would place my left ear against it. What I heard was complete silence, as if the apartment was empty and ready to be rented out. I kept my ear glued to the door, and when the neighbor in 2A caught me, she said that she had done the same and that I wouldn't hear a thing, that no sounds escaped from underneath the door of 2B, as if not even dead people lived there, for even the dead, she said, make noises. But I kept visiting her door because I was certain that Taina would become like characters in Bible stories. I had this vision of people from all over the world making pilgrimages to Spanish Harlem so they just might get a glimpse of a pregnant virgin living in the projects by the East River. They placed their ears next to the door of 2B, just as I had, and if they were lucky, they might be blessed by hearing a sigh escaping from Taina's saintly lungs. I was so sure this was going to happen. In El Barrio, Taina's story had spread. Many had shrugged, many had laughed. No one believed, but I felt that it was only a matter of time before apartment 2B in 514 on East 100th Street would be known as the building that harbored a living saint. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to start with a very nuts and bolts question because that's the way my mind works.
It's all right.
Do you write first in Spanish or first in English or kind of both?
I write in English, and then I get the stories translated.
Okay.
I have a translator.
Okay.
I always say that Spanish and English are like two dogs that I love.
Okay.
I love both dogs. But the English dog, I say sit, and he sits. And the
Okay.
Spanish dog, I say sit, and he pees. So I can't control Spanish the way I can control English. I can write you a letter in Spanish. I can talk to you in Spanish. I can write a grocery list in Spanish. But when you're talking about a novel, when you're doing somersaults with the language and puns and metaphors and all that, Spanish isn't, I don't have that mastery.
Okay. Do you use the same translator, or do you have an ongoing relationship with one translator?
This is the same translator who did Sotomayor's autobiography.
Okay.
So they gave me a new translator this time.
Okay. All right, thanks. I want to say you do a really masterful job of bringing a community to life, a community that maybe the mainstream public only knows as like a song or someplace they see from the windows of the Metro North or something, but you kind of people it with characters, real and fictional both. And I know you referred to it in your intro there about people saying, am I in it, am I in it? And I can see, also from hearing some of your monologues and things, that some of the people in your books are real people, used for fictional purposes, obviously. But has that ever caused a problem for you when somebody objected to the way they were portrayed or something like that?
The first people who will always object are your parents, your family. They're like, how can you write this? And listen, as a writer, never censor yourself. Other people will censor you, but never censor yourself. Be open, and be totally honest. So yeah, that's happened. Something funny happened like 20 years ago when I wrote Bodega Dreams. I was at a reading, and there was this sort of like homeless guy, sitting in front, and he was making a lot of noises when I would say something. He was like, oh, that's so poor, stuff like that. And I was like, who is this guy? Who is this? And then, but then he sort of stopped and he let me finish the reading. And then afterwards, he came up to me and he said, you remember me, Shorty? You remember me? And I was like, oh, God. I know this guy. His name was Eddie. And he's the one who taught me my dog trick. He was the one who would kidnap dogs and then bring them back for the reward. And I used to be that little kid. He used to always bring a little kid with him. And you would cry. I would cry. And they would give him all this money. And then he'll give me $1. And my dad's like a communist, right? So my dad's like, be a man, go work. And my dad, because he would lie to my dad. He says, can I borrow, my middle name's Boris. She goes, can I borrow Boris, to rake leaves? Can I borrow Boris to shovel snow? But we never shovel snow. We never borrow. He will always give me the dog and say, cry, Shorty, cry. And then, so when I got older, I did that trick, and I used my cousin Ralphie as a little kid. It's in the moth, I think. Right? Okay. Anyway, so that guy was there at the reading, and he was very upset, and his line was, I read your book, man, not even a chapter about me.
So more a problem with what you didn't say than what you did say.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay. That's fair enough. Yeah, I was kind of surprised that, as far as talking about drawing from real life and real people, that in reading Taina, I come to the Cape Man. And I said,
Right.
That rang a bell with me because that's the real person. And I was just finishing my bachelor's degree at SUNY New Paltz, and the real Cape Man was going there on a furlough program from Fishkill Correctional. And it was a little bit controversial in the community. And then it turns out that actually when he was on this furlough, he escaped. And I was like, I know this name, I know this person. And I think you dropped a little hint there in the book because you had the quotation from the Paul Simon song before the chapter. So do you want to talk about the Cape Man a little bit?
Sure. The Cape Man, he's sort of like it's really a very sad story in the sense that, there's many sad tears to the story, but he was this poor, pretty much abused kid from Mayagüez. And his mom, he basically grew up with her in like these really sad and poor houses in Puerto Rico. And then when they came to the mainland, the mom always had different men, and he was always being abused. And eventually he left. He left his mom, and he was living in what now is in the Upper West, in the Hudson, the Trump City. They used to all just be abandoned salt mines, and a lot of teenage runaways would live there, and that's where he lived. And then they would also, sell themselves to make extra money. And there was a lot of gangs in the 50s, and they were doo-wop gangs. And the Cape Man was in a gang. They were called the Vampires, and they would wear capes, and they would also wear the 25 cent. I don't know how much it was back then, but those fake vampire teeth. That was their thing. Okay, so one night, news came that one of their members had gotten beaten up by these. They were called the Norsemen, an Irish gang. These are all kids. They had gotten beaten up. So the Cape Man went with his boys, with his gang, to this playground on 47th Street, between 47th and 48th Street, in 10th Avenue, and there was these kids hanging in the swing, white kids, and the Cape Man just killed them. And they were not the Norsemen; they were just regular kids, just shooting the breeze. And he killed 2 kids, stabbed them, and he ended up in prison. And in prison, he sort of reformed himself. This was a terrible tragedy. There's no way around it. It's a terrible tragedy. And then in prison, he sort of as he was going to college. But he also wrote some wonderful stories, wonderful essays. And at the time, Norman Mailer, of course, loved him and tried to get him released. And anyway, so Paul Simon was very taken by this. And this is the song, Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard. And he also did the Cape Man musical in like 2000 when Bodega Dreams came out. So I basically, and he was from Puerto Rico, so I took, and a New Yorker, so I took that character and sort of mythologized it in Taina. And that's basically all to stop talking. That's basically what I'm doing with the community is mythologizing, leaving Spanish Harlem with its own mythology of hardworking people, number one, and of course its drug lords, and its young lords, and its activists, and its hardworking mothers, and of course its religious stories. And hopefully just the way James Baldwin mythologized Harlem, just the way that James Joyce mythologized Dublin, and Faulkner mythologized Mississippi. I'm doing something similar, I hope, with Spanish Harlem.
Thank you. Speaking of mythology, that's something that resonates a lot, especially in the book Taina, where everyone has their own different explanations or belief systems or something, and it's all very, very different, but it all revolves around one truth, which is the inescapable truth. And I like the phrase in the reading you said, she was kicked out of the truth, which is a reference to the church, right? But you can't be kicked out of the truth. The truth is the truth.
Right.
It's all the different approaches to it. I wondered if you wanted to talk about that, like how the different belief systems kind of clash with each other, but they all kind of respond to the same thing.
Yeah. That's something I hope to somehow subtly say in Taina, and that's basically, if that's what you want to believe, and if it helps your life, then believe it. As they're different ideas or different ways Taina could have gotten pregnant, and it's whatever you choose to believe in, that's fine. And Taina chooses to believe something, and Julio does not. Julio believes that something else has happened to her, and some crazy revolution in her body, he thinks. And I remember my dad is a communist, but my dad would always tell stories about priests and nuns in Ecuador, because my dad's from Ecuador. And my mom would always say, tú eres un comunista, pero siempre con Dios. You're a communist, but you're always with God. And my dad would answer that inside of us is so big that we can believe in everything. I was like, that sounds good.
All right, thank you. Talk about these various different beliefs and things and these mythologies. I see a lot in your books about people that are kind of caught in between competing belief systems, and in a way they're kind of forced to negotiate it and kind of tread some kind of narrow path between them. But in a way, they also seem to create their own reality around that. Suddenly it's like, I'm not A, I'm not B, I'm going to create something else in between. Kind of like what Julio does in Taina, where he's, his own explanation of her pregnancy and everything, and it's basically he's making his own mythology, I thought. I don't know. So,
no, absolutely, yeah. Yes, sure.
Okay.
Right, as an existentialist myself, I don't believe that you find yourself. To say I don't believe you find yourself. You make yourself, and I think you making yourself is way better than finding yourself. Finding yourself means that there's only one way, that eventually when you do find it, like, oh shit, that's who I am, that kind of, you might be disappointed. But if you can make yourself, now we're talking. Now the possibilities are endless. So if you can make yourself, I believe in making yourself is really where it's at.
Thank you. So coming back to the community and talking about the city and the changes in the city, the difference between New York City in the 70s and 80s and New York City now, the whole gentrification, or some people say Disneyfication and all that stuff. I remember, I grew up here, but I remember going to the city. I had relatives in the city, friends in the city. And, going to the city in the 70s, that was like some kind of epic trip. It was like some kind of dystopian medieval place, it was a very serious place. It's not like that anymore, for better and for worse, I wonder if you wanted to talk about that a little bit and your experience of that.
I think you're absolutely right. It's for better and for worse. I mean, I think, it is, the crime is definitely lower, way lower. What's worse, you have a hard time for families, especially newly arrived immigrants, to actually live in neighborhoods like Spanish Harlem. The rents are absolutely ridiculous. When my parents arrived in like 69 or something, you can get actually like a 3-bedroom, like for real cheap. And yes, there was a lot of crime, but you can actually live there. So I think the price we paid in New York City was very high during the Giuliani administration. And was it worth it? Sometimes I myself feel guilty. I walk the streets of New York City at night, and I know that they're pretty safe now. And I wonder, was this price that we paid pretty high? I mean, you can see the effects of this price that we pay by giving the police so much power that you can still see how they sometimes kill people basically for no reason, because they were given so much power to do basically anything to clean up the street during the Giuliani administration in the 90s.
Yeah. So where do you see New York City going now? Do you have any projections for the future? Do you think anything's...
I don't know, I think that, the writer Richard Price, big New Yorker as well, when me and him get together and we talk, all we do is we talk about New York City.
Yeah.
And he talks about his New York City of the 60s and 70s, and I talk about my New York City of the late 70s and 80s, all the way to the 90s, and that's what we talk about. And he believes that, and he lives like in this beautiful brownstone in Harlem. I don't. I live in Washington Heights, okay? And he believes that New York City eventually, Manhattan, will be a gated community. It's going to be a gated, it's because it just gets higher. The price is just higher and higher, and then not just the rents, but to actually buy an apartment there. And he believes that will be the beginning. And what's going to happen is the projects that face the river, because Manhattan has all these beautiful views that people who have very little money are actually living. They have waterfront views. He believes that eventually the city is going to sell those projects to private real estate, companies, and they're just going to kick everyone out, and it's going to be this, elite island, and that's just Manhattan, and then that's just going to trickle down to Brooklyn. That's what he believes, and I think maybe he's right.
It could be going that way. I don't know. I have a friend who's a jazz musician. He just desperately had to live in Manhattan. It was the no place else in the world he could live. And then finally, when he got married and he had kids, he couldn't do it anymore. And he had finally moved, and he said, I just finally realized they don't want me here anymore. And it's like, right. It's true. They don't. It's become a playground. The price of admission is very high.
Yeah, Brooklyn too. Brooklyn's getting there. And
yeah.
Eventually, the Bronx is going to be there too soon.
Yeah.
They're coming. Now, how do we fight that? I believe eventually people might get together and do something. Something might happen before Richard Price's, prophetic prophecy comes true.
Yeah, I mean,
it does.
It's kind of a reaction to pressure that the whole country is feeling. It's just more intensified there.
Right, because it's so small, so you can see it.
Yeah. Okay, I would just wanted to ask you about screenwriting, because I noticed that you do some screenwriting, and I wanted to ask you if you've got anything in the works or anything,
I'm always getting scripts, and they basically, at the beginning, I used to get excited because I thought, wow, they want my opinion, and they don't want your opinion at all. What they want is your name attached to it, right? So they can say to the studio, oh yes, it's been doctored, and that's what they call it, right? Because you're a screenplay doctor. It's been doctored by Ernesto Quiñonez. Now, who is Ernesto Quiñonez? He grew up in the ghetto, and he has this book called Bodega Dreams everybody loves, so he knows what he's talking about. And he's looked it over, and it's been doctored by this guy. It's also been doctored by whatever. And then they pay you, but they don't even take your you ever saw that? There was a movie called American Gangster with Denzel Washington. That was my first, this was like 2008, because that movie came out like in 2010 or something. And that was my first big job. And I was like, wow, they want me to like workshop this and critique it. And I made all these critiques. I thought, this isn't working, and they didn't take any of them. And my agent said, they don't want that. You should just not even look at it and just wait for a check. I was like, oh, okay. And then my own stuff, Hollywood it takes so much money to make a movie in so many different committees, and as faculty, you know how committees work. There's so many committees. There's a committee for a committee. It's sort of like that. So it's very hard for actually a movie to get made. So I'm still there.
Well, at least you can feel good about the fact that they want your name on it, whether or not they want your ideas, right?
Right.
And
exactly.
the check.
Right.
Okay, I think we'll open it up to questions from the audience. And I'm having trouble seeing people, but if you'd raise your hand with a question, and they will bring you a microphone. So, I can see the microphone coming now.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
First off, I'd like to say bendiciones.
No, thank you. Gracias.
I think I can speak for everybody here when I can say that we appreciate your presentation and your reading. If we can just get a round of applause for him really quick. I myself am originally from the Hunts Point section of the Bronx, New York, so my question has a lot of personal value.
Sure.
Growing up in the time and place that you did and experiencing discrimination, gentrification, underfunded schooling, and most likely violence, do you feel that subjects such as PTSD, convict reformation such as the Pell Grant system, financial literacy, and arguably the antiquated American educational system as a result of underfunding, do you feel like these subjects would be something that you would be interested in covering in future works if you haven't already? And if so, how would you go about it?
Well, you know, I sort of touched upon this in Bodega Dreams when Blanca and Chino, they're trying to go to Hunter College and they're trying to pay their tuition. One of the reasons why Bodega was so seductive to Chino is because he kept saying, "I'll pay your tuition if you join my program." And you know, I did not go. I teach at Cornell. I teach at an Ivy League, but does not mean that I went to an Ivy League. I'm from City College, and to this day, I never say I'm from Cornell. I went to City College of New York, and the Pell Grants helped me out. The SEEK programs helped me out. I needed that. I needed that help so that I can continue studying. So this is very important. This is all, the mastermind is basically to keep immigrants down, to keep the children of immigrants down. That's the mastermind. The more you help them, well, then what happens is these immigrants' children now get to compete with the elitist children, with those elite children of the elite, the children of the elite. And they don't want that. There's just so many spots at Harvard. There's just so many spots at Columbia. There's just so many spots at Stanford. So if we help all these immigrant kids, all these children of the immigrants, by giving them all these grants, you know, you have a battle here. So if we have less of them, then there's more spots for our children. And that's really how it works. And the thing is, you know, teaching at Cornell, I have students, and I'm not saying anything, I like my students, I do like my students, but I can just see that they rarely confront me in anything. Everything I say is fine. I rarely get original thinking, and that's basically because since they were like 5, they had tutors who've been tutoring them to make sure that they hit an Ivy League. And as the tutors, like, basically is telling them, this is how it works, this is how you do it, this is what you say, always agree with this, always agree. So there's really no originality. And I feel that the originality is more in the students who actually come from other backgrounds than the elite backgrounds with tutors and SAT practices and all of that. You basically have a factory that actually molds these students, and then here you have original thinkers who are scrapping. They're becoming more creative because they have to. And that's where originality comes from. Like James Baldwin said, being poor is creative because you have to be. You don't have to clap. It's okay. Thank you.
So I noticed a pattern with your mythologizing people, and you use all this Catholic, Christian sort of imagery. Are there any particular works that you draw inspiration from for this, or like how do you do it?
Well, you know, for Taina, I'm trying to create a bridge, literary bridge between the Latin writers, the Latin American boom writers of the 70s and 60s. You're talking Garcia Marquez, Vargas Llosa, Donoso, Rosario Castellanos, Rosario Ferrer. I'm trying to bring them into the fold with the New Yorican stuff that I grew up with. So like at the beginning, I quote Jose Donoso's The Obscene Bird of Night, which is an amazing book from Chile. And the character actually of Peta Ponce in the novel, she's the Espiritista, actually comes from his book. And there's another character that also comes from Latin America, but I'll give it away. there's a character named Usmail. And who's Usmail? Usmail is actually a character from a novel with this wonderful writer of Puerto Rico named Pedro Juan Soto. And the story of Usmail is basically the parents were so poor and they were here in the mainland and they saw the mailbox and they couldn't read English and they read the mailbox in Spanish, and the mailbox is U.S. mail. But if you read the mailbox in Spanish, U.S. mail is Usmail. So they named the kid Usmail. And it takes place in Vieques, and the kid grows up with violence, and eventually, it doesn't go well for him, and he says they give you a name, and the next thing they give you a number. So I'm trying to bring those literary characters from these novels that didn't get a lot of attention to my work, sort of making that connection.
Hi, my name is Edgar Rodriguez. I come from a college town just south of here called New Paltz. I'm so glad that you're here today. I'm so glad that two teachers from the New Paltz High School brought their students who are recent immigrants here. Lisa St. John over there on the left, and John Doyle over here on the left. So very happy to be here. When you were talking about whether you write in Spanish or English, I remember I asked Pedro Pietri, who was a poet, who wrote an epic poem called Puerto Rican Obituary. And he used to hang out in New Paltz. He was a wanderer, as you know. And he used to stay with me. I come from that era. And I asked him, Pedro, why do you write in English? He says, no, I sit behind the typewriter and I type in Spanish, but it comes out in English. Yeah. So it's kind of the reverse experience that you have. Mm-hmm. I grew up in El Barrio. Mm-hmm. I grew up in a bodega. Mm-hmm. In the 50s and the 60s. I lived in 100th Street. I lived in 124th Street. I'm struggling with my own writings about my experience because I don't want to write just about the story of the kid of color out of the ghetto, mm-hmm. because I fear that I will perpetuate the racism, the stereotyping that exists in society. So I struggle with that for years now, and I grew up with all those writers from the 60s and the 70s, personal experiences. Now, when you, at Ithaca, where you are at, Cornell, which is a place that I hang out with the Grady family, who's a radical family up there, with your students, are you perpetuating the stereotypes? And I know the students that you're talking about. These are privileged students, who may share a lot of the racism that is perpetuated in this country. Can you talk about if you struggle with that? And the question is, do your writings perpetuate the stereotypical Latino in the United States or not? Thank you.
All right. Let me just go back to my students. I love my students. I think they're absolutely wonderful. And most of them, not all of them, but most of them are privileged, okay? There are times when I walk the halls of that Ivy League, and I've been there already like 10 years, okay? I walk those halls and I say, what am I doing here? Maybe I'm better off teaching at SUNY Pulse or, City College or, And then there's this wonderful professor there named Helena Viramontes, also a writer, Chicana. And one day I voiced this to her and she said to me, Ernesto, isn't this what your father wanted? Isn't this what we all want? You are evidence that we can do this. If you go back to teaching at, let's say, City College, they're going to throw out your books, they're going to paint your office, and they're going to put a white professor there. And then who is there to represent your people, our people? And that made a lot of sense to me. So, and I hate talking about myself, and I get very embarrassed, when they always ask me, I say my daughter. I never say, being this, being a writer, being an Ivy League professor. I would say my daughter. But the truth is that what do I want my daughter to do but to actually fly higher than me? So I sort of learned to accept it, that this is actually where you should be. Because when I come back to the community, when I come back to Spanish Harlem, I don't have to even talk. They see me and they say, well, maybe I can do it too. Maybe I can reach that like Ernesto did. Now, coming back to my writing, if you want to write about where you're from, I think that's absolutely wonderful. And if you come from, let's say, a lower income bracket, that's fine. What you shouldn't do, though, as a writer coming from these backgrounds, is basically have no vision, basically have no way of somehow elevating yourself. Otherwise, you're just complaining, I'm poor, the man is keeping me down. And yes, this is true, the man is keeping you down. Now, what are you going to do about it? Yes, it's true they keep cutting your financial services. Now, what are you going to do about it? Yes, it's true they keep cutting your financial aid. All this is true. And yes, you can write about that, but now what are you doing about it? And it's having that light, having that vision, having that plan that you're going to overcome this. That's what's going to elevate your work. Otherwise, you're just complaining and complaining and complaining, and there's no light, just dark and dark and dark and dark. And I don't think that's good storytelling.
I'm going to embarrass you a little bit, make you talk about yourself. Can you just talk a little bit about how and when you decided to make yourself a writer?
I actually wanted to be a painter. I never wanted to be a writer. So it just happened, you know. I used to graffiti the trains, you know. To this day, when I ride the subway, you know, the subways were beautiful outside. Inside they were gross, I have to admit it. Inside they were totally gross. But outside, you had some amazing stuff. And I was never a master. They were called grandmaster if you were really good. I was what you call a scrub. So I was always a scrub. So these were the people that I worshipped. Lady Pink, Mace, Scene, these guys and girls, wonderful girls too. Lady Pink was amazing. She did this amazing Blondie, I remember. Anyway, so that's really what I wanted to do. And then, you know, later on I decided, you know, I might not be that good of a painter. Let me see if I can do something else. And I thought of acting, I thought of dancing, I thought of something. I said, yeah, maybe we can write. And then I just started reading everything. And I went back to school because I had dropped out of Cooper Union. And I went back to school and I went to City College. And then I met Edgar Rodriguez, who had written this amazing book. He's from Puerto Rico, amazing book of family installments. And I thought it was absolutely beautiful. And then from then on, I just read everything and started writing.
A bit of a simpler mechanical question, I guess. You mentioned working on screenplays as well. I was curious as what you found to be the biggest differences, I guess, working on that as opposed to novels.
With novels, you're basically talking about yourself and how you see things and how you see your characters and where they exit, where they enter. When you're writing a screenplay, you're basically writing it for the director. You're giving him or her ideas as well as suggestions, as well as what to do. And the thing is, sometimes the director will do whatever he wants anyway. But that's basically the difference. When you're writing a novel, it's very personal. It's basically you and maybe your editor later when he or she looks over the manuscript and says, well, you can do this. When you're talking about a screenplay, you're talking about a community of people. You're talking about the lighting. You're talking about the director. You're talking about the actors. And then the actors can basically also, you might, so I rarely give acting suggestions in my screenplays. The actor's basically gonna, say the lines the way he or she wants to. So you're trying to, in the narrative, when you write internal shot or external shot, in that little narrative, you're hoping to give the actor some suggestions on how you want this played or how you think this actor should act. This character should act. So that's the difference.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. I was wondering about your writing process. Do you have a ritual? Do you write in the morning or in the evening, alone, outside? Like, what is, if you have any process at all? And secondly, is Bodega Dreams ever going to be a movie?
I don't know, man. Bodega Dreams, like, Man, it's been like 20 years, and everybody's got that book. Everybody, like Benicio had it. He was going to make it, and then he didn't. And then Mark Anthony had it. He was going to make it. And then the Suits had it. They were going to make it. And he had it. Now, you know who has it now? Luis Guzman, that actor that he's been in everything. He's like the Kevin Bacon, Latino Kevin Bacon. He's been in everything, Luis Guzman. He has it. I don't know. And everyone told me the Suits, when the Suits get it, that's when it gets made, not the actors. But the Suits had also had it. So I don't know. And my ritual, just get to it. Just as long as you get to work. You don't have to write every day, in my estimation, if you can't. But just you have to get to it when you can't just let it stay there. I basically write in the summers or on weekends because the other times I'm teaching or something. So it's basically what works for you. And let me just say before we leave to the high school students, listen, you got to go to college, okay? There's no way out of it, okay? Just go to college. The only way that you're going to and leave your neighborhoods or leave your towns, whatever, is by either joining the army, okay, if you want to join the army, okay, and if there's a war, you're going to be in trouble, okay? The safest thing is go to college. No one told me this, and I always wanted to leave Spanish Harlem, but no one told me this. The only way that I saw people leave Spanish Harlem was that they were dead, and I didn't want to die, all right? And I didn't want to go to the army. No one told me go to college, and I remember back then. I heard of this college called Pepperdine. I had no idea what Pepperdine was, but I thought it was a cool name. I was like, wow, Pepperdine, that sounds really cool, And I remember asking the librarian, where's Pepperdine? She said, I think it's in California. So I got some books out from Pepperdine. And I said, this is a nice college. Let me ask my guidance counselor, right? And I asked my guidance counselor, I want to go to Pepperdine. And you know what he said? His name was Mr. Zapp. He had been teaching this since like 1950 or something. Mr. Zapp said, you'll never make Pepperdine. Listen, the CUNYs are good, which he was right, the CUNYs are good. But he basically just said, you'll never make Pepperdine, Maybe I would have, I don't know, give it a shot, please go to college. Whatever college you think you want to go to, go for it, okay? All they can tell you is no. They're not going to, take your life or take your future children, okay? So just keep applying. Get your grades. They don't have to be spectacular. Get that personal statement. That's what they're really looking for. It's that personal statement, that essay. They love that essay. And if that essay is interesting, you don't have to even tell the truth. They're not going to check, man. All right? So lie. You can say lie. That's right, lie. Listen, say I started a reading program in my project for blind people, and me and my friend would go and we would read to blind people. Now, make it personal. There was one specific lady. Her name was Miss Dolores Huerta. And I would go and read to her. She had no children. And she would blah, blah. They love that. That's what they want. Now, you probably did none of that. And that's fine. All right? Don't worry about it. Just, they want that. They want that essay. They want to see that you help other people. I don't know why, because you yourself are in trouble. You yourself are in lower incomes. But they want to see that you're supposedly helping the world. You're starting, let's say, a recycling program at your school. They want to see action. They want to see agency from you. That's what they're after. And make it interesting. Make it personal. And, of course, make it grammatically correct so have other people check it, okay? And you'll be fine. And if your grades are okay, you don't have to have 90s, okay? If you have C's and B's, that's fine. But if that essay is shining, they'll definitely give you a double look, and most likely they'll even let you enter, okay? So practice writing, okay? Let me tell you, before I also leave, what I would do with my fourth graders. I used to teach fourth grade. I used to teach fourth grade in the Bronx, okay? And what we would do is every year, right, a different class, we would write letters to either Nike or New Balance, Adidas, Reebok, and we would say, right, this is how I would do my lesson on how to write a business letter. Your address goes here, and we would say, I bought these sneakers, they really suck, they broke apart. And you know what we would get to the school? We would get all of them, we'll get brand new sneakers. Like, they would send us brand new sneakers. I would get all my students brand new sneakers. And then my students got really smart, right? These Dominicanos, most of them, they're like, Maestro, why don't we get TVs? Why don't we get to? I was like, no, just sneakers. That's the power of writing, okay? That's the power of writing. And that's the power that you have. And with that, you can really elevate your life. You know, and go to a good school, and really, or go to any school. Just go to college, and your life will be better. I know it sucks and it's just a piece of paper. And for some reason, our society puts a lot of freaking a value into that paper. But that's how it is. That's how it's working right now. Just do that, okay? And you'll be fine. All right? Have a good one.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to thank Ernesto Quiñonez for reading for us today, and I believe we're going to do a book signing. Is that right? Okay, that will be out in the lobby, as far as I know.